Hey folks, Richard Tubb here, and I'm joined today by Robert Baugh, who is the CEO of Keepabl. Now, Keepabl offer a software as a service solution to privacy issues, specifically GDPR. Now, GDPR for most MSPs that I speak to seems to be a bit of a pain in the backside. It's something that MSPs want to avoid. Robert has come up with a solution that I think turns GDPR into a real opportunity for managed service providers. Now, Robert was going to give me a demo of the software as the SaaS product Keepabl, but what I actually said to Robert was, well, why don't we record this and we can share it on Tublog and give the MSP audience who follow my blog a little bit of a look at Keepabl as well. So thanks for joining us today, Robert.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. And whereabouts do we find you in the world today?
So we're based in London. We're in a WeWork in London near Moorgate. So you can see the trendy glass walls behind. So nothing confidential being shared. So it's all good from a security point of view and GDPR point of view, I must add. So we're based in London. We have our tech's been built by a team in Poland who actually look after some large American organizations, and they've got an MVP program. And so we've kept with them for a bit. And we've also got a US LLC as well as a subsidiary.
Got it. Okay. So privacy as a service. This is a fairly new term that we're hearing coined out there.
Yeah.
And, this has all come around from specifically around GDPR.
Yeah.
So as I said, at the top of this, GDPR for most people, it's like, ugh, GDPR.
Yeah.
But actually, I've been sort of banging the drum a little bit, and I know that's how it's into our conversation about GDPR being an opportunity for MSPs to start a security-based conversation. So I'm intrigued to find out more about Keepabl as a platform. So perhaps we could maybe jump right in and have a look at the screen. And perhaps if you take me through the Keepabl product as though I was an MSP. Of course, I used to be an MSP. So if it's okay, Robert, I'll chime in and ask MSP-related questions as we go along.
For sure. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, because the two things you said are related. It is a real pain in the bum. And because of that, it is a real opportunity. MSP's customers are feeling the same way. Do we have to do this? How do we do it? What do we do? All organizations are feeling like that. And so it's an opportunity for the MSPs, who's the trusted advisor, to say, look, we know your systems really well. We can operationalize all of this. Let us help you with it. And we can take you through it in a really practical way using Keepabl that is simple and intuitive, and turn it into a revenue generating opportunity for the MSP, but also to the customer. It's reducing the customer's sales delay due to privacy, because the MSP's customers can say to their own prospects, look, we've got a good answer. But also if the MSP's customer gets a data breach, which, let's face it, everybody has a data breach at some point, the stats are there to show that you have a 40% less chance of having a breach that costs you over £500,000 if you are GDPR compliant compared to if you're not. So it helps the MSP in its business in sales acceleration and reducing risk, and then they can help their customers in that sales acceleration and reducing risk.
Absolutely, yeah. So it is a real opportunity. And just while you're firing the demo, so your background is you're from general counsel, aren't you, from a law background?
Yeah, so actually I did an engineering master's to start with, and I cross-qualified as a lawyer. And so I gravitated to patents and computer law and information law. And so I was in private practice in London, Hong Kong, and Melbourne doing that. And I had to go to start up in Melbourne. But I'm from Wolverhampton, which I always think is sort of self-explanatory. But what I mean by that is it's a very entrepreneurial area. I know you're a Brum yourself.
I'm from Birmingham myself. Yes.
Absolutely. And so it's a very entrepreneurial area. My family were all entrepreneurs. So I've always wanted my own business. And I went in-house, which was a way of combining being a lawyer and the entrepreneurial bit. So I've been general counsel of VC-backed growth companies for 13 plus years, taking them from literally sort of 7 people up to over 100 and listing on the market. So and sort of operating in different countries, etc. So I've taken all that experience of being the customer as a general counsel, trying to deal with all that stuff that as a general counsel you do tend to get given all the stuff that's a pain to deal with as quickly and cheaply as possible, while giving a Rolls-Royce answer to the outside world as a way to overcome sales objections, basically. So that's all of that comes into Keepabl.
Absolutely. So let's jump in and let's take a look at it then, if we may.
Brilliant.
If you want to share your screen.
Let me just share my screen now. So I'll just move to the dashboard. Can you see the dashboard there?
I can indeed, yes.
Fantastic. So This is the dashboard of the Keepabl software as a service solution, and hopefully it looks very familiar, very intuitive. It's not scary at all. You've got the working area on the right-hand side. So here you've got some widgets showing. You can watch some videos on the service. You can see the status against GDPR, how you're progressing. You can see how many activities you've done, how many impact assessments you've done, breach stats as well, and activity stats to get about how many GDPR data processing agreements you've got in place. So you can see these guys got a little bit of work to do there, but they're doing pretty good over here, and they're not doing too badly there. So the modules are all here on the left. So if I go into the menu on the left-hand side, you can see all the different modules there. So all the sort of admin side at the bottom, really, and then all the main modules here.
Yeah, and just to be clear at this point, so would an MSP log into this dashboard and it's going to show their individual clients? Is it sort of multi-tenanted, or do they log into dashboards for a client at a time?
That's a great question. So actually, just on that multi-tenancy bit, so Keepabl is only available as a cloud service. We don't do on-prem. So it's a cloud-based service. You can see up here, you've got your organization. We call this the switchboard up here. That's so an MSP would come into this dashboard as authorized on the client accounts, and every client account they're authorized on, they would see here. And actually, the way we recommend it with MSPs, because the MSP is the reseller, it's the MSP's account with us, and then the MSP has lets the customer have the account, and so the MSP can tell us, set this customer up, take this customer down, etc. So what we recommend is that the MSP is the super admin on each of the accounts. So they automatically have them appearing here in this switchboard. And then they can provision users themselves on their customers' accounts. So this MSP, for example, has these 4 organizations, and they can switch between them there. What we're going to be bringing forward is, because we have all these stats for each of the organizations, we're going to be bringing forward a league table for MSPs. And the plan there is to API with people like Autotask and Kaseya, and et cetera, to enable them to see sort of league tables of their customers.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're almost going to be gamifying it a little bit, and to see.
That's exactly right. It's the gamification and consumerization of IT. So if you look at software as a service, the typical 50-person company uses 79 software as a service tools. It's just the way that people do business, and MSPs are well placed to help their customers with that. Yep, so we try and gamify it as much as possible. So where do all these stats come from? So you can see here the data map is the real heart of a lot of the application. One of the biggest challenges people have, 70% of financial services, it's the biggest challenge. The second biggest challenge was complexity of GDPR, which was at 38%, and then support, which was at 36%. So it's by far and away the biggest challenge a lot of people have, is doing this data inventory. So what we do here is we have what we call activities, and you can click the All Activities button, a New Activities button on the right there to start a new one. Now, this is a mindset change for a lot of MSPs, where information security, you do an inventory, and you're looking at assets and information assets, and then securing that asset. With GDPR, you're looking at processes. So, and also with information security, the risk is about risk to the company. With GDPR, you're looking at what's the risk to the individuals about whom you're processing the personal data. So it's a different mindset that way. So you can see here, for example, finance payroll, or HR managing holidays or recruiting, IT access to services, secure transfer of data, etc. All these different activities that everybody does. HR recruiting, everyone does finance payroll. So the good thing is you can get up to speed really quickly. On here we have a default set of activities we can put into the account. Some might be more for finance services, so compliance, background checks for the FCA, for example. So this is how we get the information into the system. So let's choose finance payroll. So this is one of the activities. And what it is it's a web form that you complete going through. So it's a very easy way for us to make sure we can deliver all those reports that you need for the client. And so here we go. A lot of it, there's a bit of text there to give it a name, but otherwise we try and make it as point and click as possible. So this is payroll. So let's put it back to finance. We'll just click on their tile there. You can create a new one. You can edit these, and we start people off with a few. And then basically the MSP just takes the customer through this questionnaire. So have you done a DPIA and identified the risk to individuals? Now, we do actually have, let me just share a document with you. We have a policy pack as well, because as you know,
Right.
you need, for a governance system, which is what GDPR wants you to do, you do need to have a governance system in place with, unfortunately, policies and procedures, etc. So people do need those. So let me just open up this is the diagrammatic index to the policy pack. Each of these green blobs is a policy. Each, the blue ones is a procedure, and the gray ones are templates. So for example, you can go into a client and say, here's your template privacy policy. Let's use that as the basis, get it up on the website quickly. Here's your template cookie policy. Let's use that as a template. You're up and running quickly. So for example, in the impact assessments over here on the left, we've got a policy about how we do them. When we do them, rather, we've got a procedure taking you through what is an impact assessment, when do you need to do them, when do you need to do this special one called the DPIA. And then we've got templates and also one filled in, because people were saying, well, that's all really good, but how much do we have to fill in? So we've filled one in as an example. So that's really popular as well. Cool. So that takes you through how to do all of those. So here we've got the question, have you identified the risk? If you say yes, you can upload the document. You can select from a list of documents here, say what the risk is. If you say no, that question concertinas and you get asked, okay, you haven't done this special animal, the DPIA, have you done another form of an impact assessment? And if you say, so much my work network is just being a bit slow. If you say, no, we haven't done one of these, you'll go, have you done another type of assessment? If you say no, you get asked a catch-all question. So what do you think the risks are and why? Now that's a really good example, because it shows you where the questionnaire changes depending on your answers, but we use those answers to produce really gamified visual outputs that you can show the client. All of this is very much at CompTIA at the Young conference. I think it was during Young conference. It was very interesting about MSPs providing reports to the customer that the customer needs to use in their business, rather than MSPs providing the customer a report about the MSP's activities.
Exactly, yes.
So what this is you're giving the customer their risk map. So this is the risk involved in all their different activities. You can also show this as, for example, a pie chart or as a bar chart. And also here are your activities below. You can sort by the level of risk. There's this unspecified one you can interact by clicking, because that's a psychological nudge just to complete this, so that you always just put a risk to every activity. Here you can look at the very high. There's finance payroll. We can see we haven't done an impact assessment, so we probably should have. We'll just click to go back into it. And then we'll say, yes, we've done an impact assessment. We'll upload a document, say it's whichever risk we'll choose. So we'll say, yes, we've done an impact assessment. And then we'll upload the document and we'll choose, let's say we'll choose a low, well, let's make it medium. So we'll choose the medium risk. So then what we'll do is we'll go back to the scores, sorry, to the risk map. That's a different bit to show you. We'll go back to the scores. Again, gamification. We'll go back to the risk map and you'll see that very high has gone down by 1 and medium's gone up by 1. And there's finance payroll. So that's basically the way that you do it. You just go through filling in this web form about the activity, and we automatically complete the records. So this is a big question here. What's your role? Now, this is one where it's one of the first questions in GDPR is, what's your role? Are you a controller or a processor? And it's one that a lot of people don't know the answer to. It's not that hard to actually understand the answer. And this is one of those things that why I think MSPs are well placed. So say, for example, Cyber Essentials or 27001. The first time a customer looks at those or anyone looks at those, you feel like, this is just too much. I'm not going to understand this. You sort of have to bash your head against the wall a little bit. And my analogy is, it's a plasterboard wall, and all of a sudden your head goes through and you go, oh, I get this now. I understand it. Do you know what I mean? And then you're through and you can see it really clearly. So I think the same thing with GDPR. So here it's controller and processor. So if you choose controller, what we do is we create what's called your Article 30 record. So we'll put this one, which is finance payroll, into your records for Article 30, these are the records that anyone can ask to see, the regulator can ask to see them at any time. And so we've got all the details here. If you'd chosen instead that you're a processor, then it would go into your Article 30 records for a processor. Now,
if I can jump in there, for interrupting. So,
go for it.
Because you touched upon something that's very important to some MSPs, and that is, GDPR is not a technical process. Although, we're doing a screen demo here of some technical software that's helping us through that process. But there's going to be terminology, there's going to be things in there that we just don't understand yet. What do Keepabl do to help educate the MSPs about what these terms are, and support them through this?
For sure. So we have here an FAQ section where this is about to be replaced by a knowledge base that's powered by Zendesk. So we've got a really lovely knowledge base coming in, and so we're extending out all of these different answers and what's covered. So for example, we've got here, what is the GDPR? What are Article 30 records? What is a controller? What is a processor? And we've got different guides as well. For example, legal basis. So what is a legal basis? Why do we care? So it's just a few pages in plain English about, so for example, consent was a popular ground. However, after GDPR, people are trying to avoid it. That's sort of an easy bit of advice. So if we go back to the software here, so those FAQs, as I say, that's being changed into a knowledge base powered by Zendesk, which is going to be really, really beautiful, actually. The other thing as well that we do is when we onboard an MSP, we offer a GDPR 101 training session.
Okay.
And then we offer a couple of other training sessions after that, which is, well, one is, okay, let's do GDPR 201. So after you've had the GDPR 101 and we've explained about personal data and about controller processor, this sort of thing, then the UK ICO, the UK Information Commissioner's Office, which is the regulator for data protection in the UK, their website's fantastic. Very clear commercial advice on all the different aspects with great examples. So what we say is we'll give you the GDPR 101, go and have a look at the UK ICO website about the GDPR itself. We'll do a GDPR 201 and we can incorporate any questions you've got where you particularly want some explanations. And then what we do is let's show you how, as an MSP, you can get a customer compliant. And then we do another session on, okay, you've got them compliant. Now let's look at how you keep them ongoing compliant, business as usual, all using the software. So it's those four key aspects of the onboarding process for an MSP.
Got it. And let's touch upon something here. This is not specifically to do with the software, but it's an ideology, the whole idea really that managed service providers, some of them say, well, we're just there to do the techie stuff. And GDPR falls, as I said, there's some technical stuff in there, but it falls outside of that remit. Now, I've been banging the drum for quite some time, Robert, and I know you're of a similar mind, that the future of managed services is more to do with how you can help your customers put good business processes in place and become a better business. And this does sort of start that process for a lot of MSPs, doesn't it? GDPR is the opportunity to start changing ever so subtly the direction of what an MSP is.
Absolutely. And there's, I'm going to quote you here, that, I think you said that the GDPR is one of the best sales tools that's been given to MSPs for a number of years. And I couldn't agree more. I think with that whole move from break fix to recurring revenue, and then with the move from on-prem into the cloud and the squeeze on margins and how do we charge for free and all this sort of thing. And I think the GDPR is an excellent aspect because if we look at an MSP is already giving advice. So although they say, look, we're techies and we install stuff and fix stuff, that's not true anymore. MSPs are beyond that. They're already giving lots of advice. And actually, when they look at the amount of areas they're giving advice in, it's quite broad. A lot of people talk about MSSPs and that recent move to MSSPs and that it's security advice. And obviously, GDPR is perfect alongside security. But an MSP does give a range of advice. It's just consulting advice. It's not legal advice. No one's saying become a lawyer. No one's saying give legal advice. But what we're saying is with a tool like this, you can actually help your customer on business processes in a really nice, simple way. There's, as I say, you can see here gamification 8% here. You can see all the different gamification. It's easy to follow. Doesn't take any real training to get up and running on it. We often get the comment, "This is so simple," and people go, "I mean that in a good way." We go, "Don't apologize. That's a great thing to hear." And so it helps you go through. And the reason I brought this screen up is because this is automated gap analysis on that data map from the answers. So, for example, one that's really appropriate for MSPs here is, where do we not encrypt personal data at rest? So that should really be a 0 return. So they can use that as a way to say, okay, you're not encrypting. Have you got an encryption system? Maybe we tried to sell you one before and you've only used it in certain areas. Let's sell you this encryption system and get you really working nicely there. Sorry, yeah.
And forgive me for interrupting again, but this is where GDPR is such an opportunity, isn't it? Because as a former MSP myself, Robert, when I used to have conversations with clients about encryption, and they would always put it in the nice to have. We'll come back to that, Richard. We'll have that conversation another day. GDPR brings these things to the surface because if you're gamifying it, as Keepabl does here, and it's showing people, hey, there isn't encryption here. We should probably have this in place. It's going to prompt the customer to say, yeah, let's have that conversation. So the customers are actually coming to you and saying, let's talk about these other services and solutions that you offer.
Absolutely. Exactly that. And it's the 360-degree view you get of a customer with GDPR, because you go through every business process. You say, as you saw earlier, you go, okay, let's look at finance. We know you do payroll and expenses, and we know you pay suppliers, and maybe pensions as well, obviously. Marketing, you do webinars, you do sort of events, emails, and so the MSP can already pre-fill a lot of this for the customer and go in and say, look, we've already done this for you. The customer then is really bought into it and go, this is great, all my stuff's in there. They want to keep it going, and they say, so can you help us with, as you say, all the different upsell, cross-sell opportunities? It's a really fantastic one. So this one here, this screen here, does show you, for example, questions, where do we rely on this legal basis? So where do we rely on consent? And so you could go, well, do you want to be relying on consent there? Because if you do, you've got to make sure you get certain records in. And again, we've got a plain English guide about why we're asking each of these questions and what it means for the answers, whether you have anything there or not, and what the next steps are. So it's for example, where can we not identify the personal data of an individual? So this is one where, for example, data discovery, you mentioned encryption, and secure sharing of data is another one. Yes. Obviously, backup is the big one, where people have been trying to sell sort of Veeam, Datto sort of backups and disaster recovery solutions, and the customer said, do I really need this? Do I have to have this? And they change their mind when there's been a breach, and they say, why didn't you tell me? And the MSP has to sort of get the emails out and go, we did. But it's GDPR is the legislative stick they can use to say, yes, you actually do now. And secure sharing, data discovery, backup, and disaster recovery. There's a whole range of services that MSPs are already selling that they can now really turbocharge.
Yeah.
So that data map there, when we fill out these activities that we were looking at, so we were looking at the finance payroll one. I showed you that this leads through to the risk map for the customer. It also leads through to their processor map. These are all the processes they've said are being used across their activities. And so you can also do some immediate remediation here. Have we got a GDPR compliant agreement in place, for example? Also, each one has their own page, so you can see what activities they're involved in. This is often the first vendor management tool customers have, actually. So they can say, well, actually, if we want to swap out Salesforce, this is where we've got to think about we're going to be impacted. And we also link back to this and breach as well from the breach module. So we do the risk map, we do the processes. I've shown you the Article 30 records and that activity analysis, which is the gap analysis in that side. We do transfers, which is a register of all the different transfers outside Europe where you need to have a certain basis for those. So again, it's all just nicely presented. The second thing we do is this benchmark. So the way that you typically go through a GDPR project is you go to a customer and you say, right, whereabouts are you in GDPR? Let's establish that using this benchmark first. So you can answer these questions for them, or you can take them through them. You can see there's a lot of yes/no partials. There are 80 questions. It tracks through GDPR and the e-privacy regs in the UK, so repurposing, consent, etc. And when you answer those, you get them scored here. You get an overall roundel, which is really popular for reporting to the board or the exec team. But what's really good is we break it into 7 areas, but then into 17 sub areas. So it really does gamify it for the MSP and the customer in saying, where do we need to focus? And if I show you someone who's not doing so well, so Euro hedge is on, I think, something like 38%. So, they're on 44. We bumped them up after a couple of questions. So they can say, okay, 44, where do we focus next? You can see transfers is an area they need to focus. Objections is an area they need to focus. So you can then go away and focus on those areas. There's a guide to each of these questions saying, if you're not, this is what you need to be able to do to answer yes. So you can look at those questions and say, these are the things we need to do. Let's go back and update our answers, and we'll end up going back up to sort of 80%. And the idea is to get to 100%, and people do get to 100%.
Yeah.
And then the next bit that I just wanted to show you very quickly is this breach module, which is really a product within a product.
Yes.
This is really MSPs should be all over this, because basically, there's a new obligation with GDPR. Every single business has to report certain data breaches to the UK ICO, which I said was the regulator for data protection. And in fact, the law's written that you have to notify a breach to them unless. So the unless bit is if it's unlikely to result in a risk to the individual whose data has been leaked or what have you, then you don't need to notify. So if it's unlikely to result in a risk, you don't need to notify. Anything other than that, you have to notify the regulator. And if it's a likely high risk, you're going to notify the individuals. And you also must record every single breach. So this is how we do it. We have a breach record here, very much like that activity I showed you. When you enter in a breach, it goes into your breach log. So I'll just show you the breach log here. This is one where we've put in quite a few different ones. You can see the headings across here, the sort of things that you need to know to manage it. And you can see that if there's been notifications, they're listed here. And here's those links to the processors. So you can see, well, if this is if this processor had a breach, what else is infected, for example. So going back to this breach log, if we just go into the breach record, we've used the UK Information Commissioner's report a breach form here in the service. And we've added in some other questions for managing it. It needs to be a little bit more text entry and document upload than the other one because you're reporting about a breach, but we still made it as point and click as possible. And so these are all the questions you'll need to be able to answer the UK form, and things like, typical interactions with calendars and this sort of thing. All of your processes are there, so you can just click on them to choose them. In terms of personal data, if you've created lots of categories elsewhere in the system, they're all here for you to choose, and also the sort of people who are involved. And if we go down here to the big question, which is, how likely is the risk to the individual? Is it high, low risk? As you choose different risks here, the system gives you the nudge about whether you need to notify. So there's a question, have you told the individuals about the breach? We've got here, you've determined there's a likely high risk, you need to. So that if we reduce the risk to likely, then what you'll see is that sentence disappears.
Got it.
So as you tell the system what the risk is, the system gives you the nudges about whether you need to notify. So here you can see it's still there that you need to notify the supervisory authority, which is the ICO. And this is how you do the notifications in the system. So what's nice about the breach one is, and this is where it's really good for this vCPO offer that we were talking about, and actually it links into the vCISO as well, which is the virtual chief privacy officer role. And so what an MSP can do is, here you can put the email address for people to get email alerts when a new suspected breach is put into the system. So for example, I lose my laptop on the train, I enter it into the system. If Richard's email's here in the alerts, you get an instant email saying, Robert's just created a new breach, suspected breach. Here's the link to the record. You can go in and have a look. You can use the MDM tool to freeze it, see if anyone's accessed it, locate it, and maybe remote wipe it if you need to. And so you can rapidly react, which is the really key thing on breaches. And down here, we've got a link that is unique to each customer in the system. And we call that the breach button. The MSP can put that on the SharePoint intranet. Wherever the customer is, they can, if they had suspected data breach, they can click on that button. They enter in a new breach in the system. It goes into the breach log, email alert comes out to the MSP, and they can be right on it to contain it. So it's a really lovely breach product.
Absolutely agree. And I would say this is a killer feature. And the reason I'd say that is because whether an MSP wants to be dealing with GDPR or doesn't want to be dealing with GDPR, they are going to be dealing with this because the first sign of a laptop being lost or data being lost or any of those sort of technical issues, they are going to reach out to the client's going to reach out to their MSP and say, what do we do? So the MSP is going to have to answer this, and you're making it so simple. We all hope that these things won't happen, but you and I have worked in the industry long enough to know that it's not a case of if it will happen, but when it will happen.
Exactly.
And so you're making it really simple for them to actually, the MSP, to actually guide their customer through the process here.
Yep, and it's capturing all that data, capturing all those records. It's not in a spreadsheet somewhere. It's in a cloud-based system that anyone can look at. You can give them access. So, for example, if a regulator said, how are you doing on GDPR? Or if a potential customer said, how are you doing? You can give them guest access. So you can create a user on your account. These are all demo here. So you can put in the user details. And then here you can select the organizations for which you're an admin, which might be different from the one up top. And then you can create user types. So there's an admin, they can change everything. But if you went for guest, for example, they can only view certain things. And you can change this. You can hide certain things. Maybe you want them to edit those or view those. And then it goes to custom, and you can always snap it back at any time. So you can give an auditor, you can give a prospect, a potential investor, you can give the regulator, just even you want to only show them the breach module, you could just show them that and nothing else. And then you can send out the activation email, and then you can come in and take them off when you don't want them there anymore.
Fantastic.
So it's 2FAs in there as well. So individuals.
That's going to be my next question.
Absolutely, it's here. So in my account area, I've got two-factor authentication, and the way we do it is that super admin, which as we recommend in the reseller model is the reseller on an account. So on an account, you have one super admin, which is set by Keepabl, changed by Keepabl for business continuity. That super admin can then create however many users they want. They can create other admins who can also create users, and they can create guests, etc., as we showed you in custom. So if a super admin turns on 2FA, then it's enforced for the whole organization, and they just have to use it. Here it says it's not being enforced for our organization. We strongly recommend you turn it on. So we have it off as a default, and then the 2FA can enable it. And then if the 2FA decides to disable it, or rather not enforce it anymore, it remains on for everybody until they turn it off as the secure default. So there we go. And it's just the free apps, Google or Authy.
Authy is the one that I use, and I know lots of MSPs use as well. So
Yep, it's all supported there. So so that's the way that you can go through helping someone. That's how we basically generate all this information in the dashboard. And so one of the things one nice stats that came through is 78% of businesses now report to the board on GDPR. There's been that the recent announcements of 183 million fine on British Airways and 99 million on Marriott, which are just stupendous. Yes. And then put in the shade in the US by the 5 billion on Facebook. But what's more interesting for me is things like there was a taxi company in Denmark that was using phone numbers as the identifier in the system. 2 years old, they'd remove all personal data apart from the identifier, which they kept for longer. And the Danish regulator said, you don't need to use the phone number. That's personal data. You're using that and storing it for longer than you need to. So they fined them 140,000 euros. And then a furniture company in Denmark, and this is one that's going to resonate, had a legacy database that when they moved to a new database, they just left it there. And they had 380,000 customers' details in this legacy database. The Danish regulator fined them 180,000 euros. Now, those are typical sort of things. It's a taxi company, it's a furniture company. Going smaller, there was a sports cafe in Austria that had CCTV, and the CCTV also captured public area. They didn't have the right notices up. They didn't have a documented reason why they were keeping the data, because they just kept it forever. And so they got fined £5,000. Someone in Germany actually notified the regulator saying, we've had a breach. The regulator investigated it, and they went, because it doesn't just stop if you notify a breach, they'll actually investigate. So the regulator investigated it and found out that the passwords had been stored in plain text. So even though this company had come to the regulator and said, we've had a breach, they had fantastic security processes otherwise than this glaring error. And they were very, very reactive to and cooperative with the regulator. The regulator still fined them 20,000 euros and said, the reason we made it only 20,000 euros is because the other costs of remediation for the business take this well into the six-figure sum. So the fine is actually just a small part of the overall cost of the business. So this is where, if you're GDPR compliant, it reduces that cost impact of a default.
It mitigates it, isn't it? Because it's about demonstrating the steps that you've taken. And as MSPs as well, we need to demonstrate the steps that we've taken to keep our clients safe. And we process a lot of information, don't we?
Well, this is it.
MSPs for clients. So my next question was going to be, Robert, MSPs, can they use this tool for their own business as well?
Well, this is a really good point. So as I mentioned at the beginning, two main things that we see is, one is the sales opportunity, as you said, in terms of being able to say, we have a good GDPR answer. So Keepabl, used by an MSP, gives the MSP a really good answer to their customers. So for example, when I was general counsel of the companies I was in, we didn't have an IT department, and we relied on MSPs. And I was asking the MSPs, do you have 27001? What's your, I was asking them all the different questions. And I went for the ones that had 27001 or et cetera. So I had a certain requirement for that in one of the companies I was in. But in all of the companies, I always asked, what are your processes? Let me see how much access you have to different data. And so it's a way for MSPs to be able to show, well, look, we take GDPR seriously. You can see all the activity we've done on GDPR. You can see all of our impact assessments. You can see everything's here in the file library, for example. You can see our risk map is maintained. We know who all our processes are, etc. You can look at the gap analysis, see we're doing really well. That's a really good way for MSPs to shorten their sales cycle and get contracts in earlier. Yes. But also, as we were just talking about, MSPs have access to a load of data, and MSPs just going through GDPR themselves, they'll have that benefit that they'll be reviewing all of those activities, reviewing all the security and the sharing. And so if the MSP is breached, it's likely to be a lot lower impact on them. And in fact, at the CompTIA Bristol event, the security keynote made a point of stating that MSPs had been targeted by hackers for that very reason.
And rightly so, because they're the key holders to an incredible amount of data, and the key holders to an incredible amount of devices, systems, networks. We're targets. We are targets.
Absolutely. So also one of the good things is we actually give this for free to MSPs who sign up as a Keepabl reseller.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's free for the first year. Otherwise, we'd be subsidizing the whole industry forever. But it's free for the first year. And then it remains free for a year from every customer sign up you get. So for example, as long as you've had a customer in the last 12 months, it stays free. Bring on a new customer last 12 months, it stays free. You've got to bring on a customer basically every 12 months, which is not a very high hurdle.
Definitely not. And I would argue that the MSPs should be offering this service to their clients, because if they don't, somebody else is going to come in. And then, dare I say, it's going to end up with that pain in the backside situation where an external party is saying, hey, we need administrator rights here to do our exploratory, and it just becomes, we wish we'd done this ourselves to save all the pain.
Or even worse, that third party, I totally agree with you about that. That third party comes in, they get that 360-degree view, and they go, you haven't got a backup system. Haven't your MSP been telling you about it? What do you mean you don't use encryption? And the MSP will have said in every one of those quarterly meetings, they got emails, they got notes saying you've got to do encryption and backup, and the customer said no, whatever. The third party comes in, looks at it, haven't they told you to do this? Yeah. What are you doing with them? Why don't you come to us? It's a defensive play as well as it expands the remit of the trusted advisor for the MSP, because the MSP knows all the processes anyway. They can go in with it mostly pre-filled to the customer. It's adding value into that relationship. It makes it a much stickier relationship. You're opening the cupboard and looking for the skeletons yourself, and you know the history about why those skeletons are there, and you're not at risk from a third party coming and doing that.
Absolutely. I think this is the first step towards the future of what managed services is. I know that's a bold statement, but I truly believe that. And we've been talking about it for a long time. MSPs have got to be more. They've got to be these trusted advisors, not just the techie, the IT guy. This is now being forced upon us. Yeah. This is now not a decision that you're going to make. If you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. And this is why, I've been so intrigued by Keepabl. So thank you for giving us this overview of it, because you're making it easy for MSPs to take that first step into the future.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. I totally agree with you about the way MSPs are going. It's when we speak to the MSPs, like a year ago, MSPs were saying, we asked a lot about GDPR, but we're not too sure about whether we're going to be doing it ourselves. And they didn't necessarily understand it. The conversations we're having with MSPs now, MSPs are going, yep, we're doing GDPR. We know about GDPR. We're in those conversations. We're looking for a tool like this. So it's the MSP market has really matured on GDPR with the rest of the business market in the last year.
Absolutely. And I know we could probably do another webinar about all of the potential things that you could do with a platform like this, because my mind is sort of being blown a bit. But where do you see the Keepabl platform going in the future? What could you see to do with it?
Great question. So our actual targeted strategy is to be the Salesforce.com of compliance. So if you think of Salesforce.com, they started off with a point solution on CRM, and then they went to App Exchange model, and then they went into the Force.com model. So what we're looking to do is we're going to be adding the California Consumer Privacy Act, which is their version of the GDPR in California. It's actually got the whole of the US in a tizzy because it applies to anyone doing business in California, and the fines are really big as well. And as we've seen, the US put in some big fines. So we're going to cover the CCPA. So we've got the main US data protection law and the main European data protection law. And then we're going to be moving into information security. And this is really exciting. When we talk to MSPs, if you imagine, and they love this, they always end up going, can you manage security through this? Because ISO 27001 is a real pain. So imagine here, these activities were risks instead of activities. And so you had, this is the risk, this is the risk owner, this is the likelihood, the impact, this is our treatment plan, tolerate, transfer, etc. We can actually, so the risk map's still applicable, your suppliers is applicable, the breach module, we're expanding that at the moment to start off from a security event. We can then, instead of the transfers, we'd say do your risk treatment plan. And so you can really see, we deliberately did the architecture so that we could expand it to other compliance regimes. So we're going to do the US data protection law, the big California one, and then we're moving next year to start covering off information security, taking people through Cyber Essentials and 27001.
Got it. Now, this is a statement I never thought I'd make on camera related to GDPR, but I'm excited for the future here. It's exciting times. There's a lot of very, very interesting opportunities for MSPs off the back of this. So
I think it's a real saver with the way the market's going.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's going to help differentiate MSPs who offer these type of services from those that don't. I think this is going to be a real game changer. It already is a game changer. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
So, for any MSPs who are watching this, any end clients who are watching this and thinking we want our MSP to be using a product like this, how can people get in touch with you personally, and how can they find out more about Keepabl?
Fantastic. So Keepabl.com, we do have a get in touch with us form there. You can also just email us at hello@keepabl.com, so nice and easy. If you're an MSP, you can also email us at partners@keepabl.com. Either's fine, whichever way you like to get in contact. You can also, I'm on Twitter at RJ Baugh or at Keepabl, also LinkedIn as well. So any of the methodologies that people would like.
Super. And we'll include all of those details in the show notes as well, so people can reach out to you. But Robert, thank you for letting me put you on the spot here. Not many people would, but when you said I'll give you a demo of the product, I was like, no, let's, instead of just giving me a demo, let's give everybody a demo of the product. So I really appreciate you doing that. And good luck for the future with Keepabl. For me, I think this is a can't miss proposition. I think you're going to do great things with this, and you're really going to help the MSP industry as well. So keep us posted on this. We're intrigued to see where you go with it.
Will do. Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Been a pleasure.
Cheers, Robert.